Welcome back. The show's called Brand Equity, and this is a special presentation. It's the Agency Reckoner 2013. And now it's time to chat with the most admired marketer of 2014. That's none other than Vodafone. Vodafone along the years has been one of the most engaging brands despite their several makeovers. Let's not forget it started off as Orange, went on to becoming Hutch and then Vodafone. In all its avatars, the brand managed three things rather well: creativity, consistency in communication, and last but not the least, positioning. So despite being in a category that is extremely competitive and competing across segments with the FMCGs of the world, Vodafone's communication strategy, be it above the line, below the line, customer service, or embracing the new world of digital, it has managed to remain true to its values. Something most brands seem to forget as they grapple with today's complex and sophisticated communication landscape. So I caught up with Vodafone India's CEO, Marten Pieters, and the conversation that ensued was refreshingly honest. Listen in. Thank you so much for joining us, Marten. Truly a pleasure to have you on ET Now.
Thank you.
At the outset, let me congratulate you on being the most admired marketer of the year, and that is really no mean feat given the fact that you were competing with brands across categories. But if you just look at leading telecom operators in the country, which include yourself, right? Broadly, everybody has the same service in terms of the offering, right? What do you think you're doing right? Because finally it's about connectivity and getting our data usage, but that's something that we expect from any telecom operator. So obviously you're doing something more than just the service.
Starting in our business network and coverage is extremely important. We now have 90 million customers in rural areas. Why is that? Because we've rolled out big time also in areas where a lot of operators don't go.
Right.
Where in places like Mumbai and Delhi you have a choice from maybe 8 or even more networks. If you go to the more remote places, you might at best have 2 or 3, at best. The other thing is then how do you treat the customer and how much effort and money do you put into that? And I always say that all starts with people. It might sound funny because it's a technology business, it's a service business, but in the end service business is run by people. And we have put a lot of focus in Vodafone on making sure that our staff is happy. And that is what we have been investing in a lot, which is the softer side of the company. So the customer comes with a lot of questions and remarks back to us. It all needs to be coordinated, and all these people need to be knowledgeable to understand the customer's problems. And that is, as I said, not easy, because actually people don't realize it, but many problems that people have with handsets, for example, they come to us.
Really?
If people have problems with an app, if you use, let's say, WhatsApp, and it doesn't work for whatever reason, do you know where to go? Is there a WhatsApp shop in town? No, there is not. So where do you go? You go to your operator, you go to Vodafone in this case. Right. So we actually do customer service on a lot more aspects than actually the aspect that we deliver ourselves, which is in the end more or less the connectivity. And that's actually a big challenge, because we have 70 crores of customers. So you can imagine, every month we get something like 40 million calls physically answered in the call center. We're not even talking about the ones that end up in an IVR. Getting that right with a staff turnover of probably anything between 10 and 20% at least is really a challenge. But that's what the customer expects from us. And by the way, we also know India is the place of very low tariffs. So it's not that we have a lot of money available to serve the customer, because the customer on average gives us, maybe 100 to 200 rupees, and of course you have high value customers that give you a lot more. So you can't really put a gold-plated customer service on top of that. It's simply impossible to pay for that. So the challenge of getting the customer happy, having the offer right, but then also doing it in a cost-effective way, I think that is the real challenge where operators are struggling with. And you can see in India you need scale for that. So the bigger operators are better at that because they have the scale. If you're smaller, that's actually a real challenge. But I think if you look at our advertising over the years, because this is again something that is in the DNA of this company, this is not something that came when Vodafone came. Vodafone has explored it and improved it, but it was already there. Hutch had great advertising. If you look at the past advertising that was done, it is really advertising that goes straight to the heart of the customer. I always like if we do customer interviews, and we do them a lot. and you start talking about how's the connectivity, what do you think about the pricing, what do you think, and people are very serious, and you see them think very hard, and then you say, what do you think about the advertising? And then they start to smile, this broad smile comes on their face, and, oh yeah, the puck, I love the puck. Or, Zuzu's, great advertising, the Zuzu's. Suddenly you can see you go from the brain to the heart, and I think a really successful brand needs to do that.
Marten, you talked about, one of the key focuses that Vodafone does is also ensures customer retention. My question to you is, I don't think customers really change their service provider, whether they are or are not happy with them, just because this is too much effort, and it's the state of inertia that one is with their service provider. For instance, my point really being, MNP. Right, and we thought that it's all going to be a game changer in terms of, disgruntled customers will just move and keep hopping in and hopping out. But it really hasn't taken off, has it?
As long as you're kind of reasonably happy with, again, the network quality, you're probably not going to shift an operator, because does it matter a lot if you pay 50 rupees more or less? For you, probably it doesn't matter. But there's a huge segment in the market. We're really talking about half of our customer base, out of the 170 million, about half of the customer base is very volatile. They will sometimes go on a monthly basis to other operators, not even to talk about the people who carry two SIMs. Most of the handsets these days in India sold are dual SIM handsets, sure. Meaning that they anyhow can very easily swap between the two SIMs, which typically are, of course, of different operators. So what we see as one of the big operators with good connectivity is that people typically use our SIM for incoming calls. But then there is an offer of typically a smaller operator, which has a very aggressive pricing scheme, and they might put in the second SIM of that operator, and they might swap that every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the offer in the market. So our SIM is there kind of stable, but it's not being used very much, because it's more used for incoming calls, because you always have the connectivity. So it's good to have the Vodafone network, as they say. It's good to have the Vodafone network, best network. But are they then using us to make the call out, where we get the money from the customer? The answer is sometimes that's difficult. So it's a very competitive market. Our colleagues in Europe don't have that problem, because, there you, as you say, you need to physically change operator. Here, typically people have the two operators next to each other in the same handset. From the past, when we started 20 years ago in the metros, in Delhi and Mumbai actually, there is still a perception in the market that Vodafone is like a high-end player.
That's true.
It's a perception issue, and you can see how long perception is lasting, where actually now we have more customers in rural areas than in urban areas, not even to talk about the metros, who of course relatively have shrunken compared to the rest of the country, because there's far less people there. So we need to serve all these segments, and it comes back to making sure that you have something that is relevant for that customer. And then once he is your customer, that he stays with you, so customer retention, and that comes very much back to the customer service and the way you treat the customer.
If you look at simple market shares, both subscriber and revenue, so Airtel would be number 1, Vodafone number 2, Idea following number 3. When do you think you'll make it to the number 1 position when we talk about both revenue and subscriber share?
Well, what we see in the telecoms industry everywhere in the world is that there is a kind of land grab phase where market shares can easily shift. If the what we call penetration, so the number of people that have a phone is small and the market is growing very fast, then it is relatively easier to grab more of the growth of the pie.
Sure.
Once the market has established, it's extremely difficult to shift market shares. You can only do it typically or over a very long period with very small shifts, which actually we have done the last few years, because the last 5 years, every year we grew about 0.5% market share. So we're now at just over 22%. We started when I came in at 17 something. So we did a bit more than 0.5% per year, which you can kind of gradually do. If you want to say, now I want to go from 22 to 30, where Bharti is, that would mean probably years of intense price fighting. Yeah. So you bring down the whole market, and nobody's interested in that. Why would you want to do that? I always say we're in the business not in the end for market share, but in the end to make money for our shareholders. And believe me, that in itself is a huge challenge in the telecoms industry in India, as you know. Being number 1 for me is not relevant. What we need to be is a good operator for our customers, a good company for the customer, and then make money for the shareholder. Sure. And if I can do that with 22% market share, then that's absolutely fine. There is no law that says you need to have 30%. And actually, if you analyze what's happened in the market the last 2 years, you see that the top 3 operators have taken about anything 70%? Between, it's actually more, 80 to 90%. Last year it was 90%, this year it's come down a bit to 80% of the growth of the market. Because customers are moving there where the best networks are. And yes, there might be a little bit of a price difference, but that doesn't mean it's a value difference. Maybe you get more value for your buck with the bigger operator. Yeah. In the past, once you build a voice network, scaling it up a bit for more volume is not very expensive. Data is different. Now we see internet is exploding. 3G is doing very well. There's this perception in the market that 3G is not doing well in India. It's not true. 3G is doing very, very well.
In the sense it's driving internet usage.
Yeah, but also in terms of volumes. If you see how quickly, after 3 years more or less, we have 3 years 3G in the market now, you see how quickly we have driven volumes. Already our 3G volume is 40% of our 2G volume. Already our 3G users, for example, Vodafone, India, the highest usage of data in the world for Vodafone of all the 30 countries that they're in is already in India. And if you realize that we only have 3G in half the country, because the rest is actually, we don't have the spectrum. So there is a tremendous opportunity here in data. But the problem there is that it comes with a lot of additional investment.
You know, as the most admired marketer for 2014, what would you say to marketers all and sundry across categories in terms of a message from the leading brand?
Observing what I've seen in more companies is that's always, in a way, a balancing act between driving creativity, but at the same time not drive it to a level that you disconnect from the customer. And I think that is what we have been struggling with over the time. You might say the result has been good because we have actually great results. But believe me, it is a struggle. Because if you are not creative enough, your advertising won't be good enough and it is like mainstream and nobody looks at you. Right. The moment it gets too creative, sure, there's a big chunk of your customers who doesn't get it anymore, is no longer interested. Indeed, also having more rural customers, of course, makes that a different challenge. Exactly. So getting that balance right is, I think, one of the things that marketeers really need to look at.
Thank you so much, Marten. Truly a pleasure and many congratulations once again. That was Marten Pieters of Vodafone talking about the brand journey and what it takes to be on top. On that note, it's time for a short breather, but coming up, the 3 most influential men of advertising and marketing come together to talk about their key milestones, their trials and tribulations, and their journey so far. You cannot miss this one.